Welcome to Downloaded, the show where we gather the most opinionated voices in the tech field today and focus that energy on the stories impacting the tech world. I'm your host, Roger Chang. Jim is absent today. He's busy doing whatever CEOs do. But I am joined by Iyaz Akhtar, co-host of Today in Tech and the host of Know How at twit.tv.
Yes.
And to his left is Janko Roettgers, senior writer for GigaOM and the host of Cord Cutters.
Hey.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming. Probably should get to the first story. Twitter is going to do an IPO, and in fact, you actually wrote this article, Janko. Why TV will play a big role in Twitter's IPO? Why will TV play a big role in Twitter's IPO?
Twitter has been working for a while to establish relationships with studios and kind of get their product more TV ready. They're starting to make recommendations for TV shows you should follow based on the people you follow, or you should watch rather based on the people you follow. And what they're really trying to do is build relationships with advertisers, because in a way Twitter is a really good way to find an audience that is not only watching it passively while they're doing something else, but they're actively engaged. They're actually saying something about a show. And Twitter has started to do this thing where they're saying, okay, if this person is now tweeting about this show and the show is on right now, then we also know what kind of ads this person is seeing. So you could send them promoted tweets at the same time that relate to the ads on their TV screen, which is actually kind of really interesting. And what they're trying to do is kind of not get money away from broadcast, not steal money away from TV, but kind of be a partner to that and maybe make these ads even more worth their money.
Kind of like the barnacle on the side of a ship. They want to kind of latch on and take advantage of the situation.
It's an interesting analogy, but yeah.
I know you, Iyaz, are a big cord cutter. Now, would you be doing, like if you were watching a show on your cord cutting device, would you go out and say, I'm watching blah, blah, blah with Get Glue or whatever, and hashtag like, Once Upon a Time. I love that show, by the way. Once Upon a Time on Disney. If you haven't seen it on ABC, you should. I love it. But yeah, I mean, do you think it's something you would actively do?
Well, technically, I'm not a cord cutter because it's cheaper to have cable and internet for the speeds I wanted. They gave me a deal. So the box, I don't even have a cable box. I do have a modem. Use that. So technically, according to Comcast, I'm a subscriber, so I count for one of those things. I never use my cable box, so I don't think I really should count, but I do. When it comes to Get Glue, though, I feel that's so spammy when I'm watching a show, especially if it's out of sync. So if you're watching a live thing, I totally get that. Watching the NFL, you're watching the Oscars or something, and that's an event that's happening with these hashtags, and you can have this conversation. That seems pretty interesting. But when I'm talking about, like, if I'm watching Orange is the New Black and you're watching it, and I'm at episode 12 and you're at episode 6, it's a little strange because the interaction isn't the same, and you don't want to read my tweets because I might be spoiling things for you. So it's that weird.
You'll be spoiling it. So
that's the other thing. So I won't tweet about it. So that's the thing. Like, it actually, the on-demand cord cutter version of me is like, I don't want to spoil anything because I don't want to be spoiled either. So if anything, it stops me from engaging on Twitter with the hashtag Orange is the New Black, because when Piper does this thing, I don't want you to know yet.
I mean, does this give a new lease on life on broadcast TV? I mean, at least on this show, we've kind of drummed in the opinion that broadcast TV is slowly on its way out, however much it kicks and screams. But I mean, effectively, like what Iyaz was saying, Janko, like, I mean, does this give live broadcast a new leash? Because now it's a shared experience, not just with the people in your household, but in a much wider community. Whether they're on this side of the United States or halfway across the world, if it shows like simulcast or something like that.
I think it gives sort of a second boost to the broadcast and live TV, because people are starting to tune in, especially for live events, obviously. If it's sports, if it's, I don't know, the Emmys next weekend, stuff that is going on that attracts big audience already, attracts even bigger audiences now with Twitter and with people engaging. But there's also some effect, even if I don't watch Breaking Bad at the same time. If I see everybody talking about it on Twitter because this episode was apparently so mind-blowing, it gets people to watch and catch up. Maybe within the first 24 hours, maybe within the first 48 hours, but you still have like this weird fuzzy pool of a bigger audience that doesn't watch everything at the same time and maybe uses different means to watch it, but they're still all engaging with the show. And for Twitter to kind of take advantage of that and maybe also make some money with it makes a lot of sense.
Now, one of the things that you and I were talking about before you got here, Iyaz, because you're stuck in traffic, is that one of the things I posited is like Twitter kind of gaming or positioning itself to be kind of a new game player in kind of the Nielsen ratings, where we can track these eyeballs that Nielsen can't because of the way Nielsen's set up. Do you think they will be a serious threat in that space where they can say, to advertisers, we know how well your ads are going to do because we can track the number of tweets at the appropriate or at the approximate time your ad or whatever runs, and we can tell you 40% retweeted or talked about it, or 60%. We give you a good gauge whether or not you should run that ad again or you run something else.
I think Nielsen is very aware of this, that there's some danger to this maybe, and they actually bought a startup in this space that does some social TV measurement or tells people how much is being tweeted about a certain show and stuff like that. And so actually there are now Nielsen Twitter ratings, which is, I guess, a sort of cooperation between both companies, a frenemy relationship, if you will, if you follow that theory. But it is true that it's not just about these big audiences that are kind of aggregated with a fuzzy logic as well, with these boxes that are a couple thousand boxes speaking for millions of people. But now there's a much bigger engaged audience, and Twitter is making use of that. And it kind of lets you drill down much more to precise numbers as well. You know, like from what devices people are tweeting, you know when they're watching it, you know how long they're watching it, what they're really excited about. You can Twitter has some technology where they actually generate sentiment about a show, and made sense for an advertiser to net advertiser on the show that is, well, people really hate it but watch it anyway. I don't know, it makes a lot of sense. But so there's a much more granular data now available, and Nielsen is using some of it, but Twitter has a lot of it as well.
Now, Twitter recently redid its whole blue line thing where you could follow a message thread, the blue line, which is very interesting. But I mean, Twitter looks like it's trying to kind of maybe not reinvent itself, but seriously rebooting kind of the interface, because I think are they in this space where we have the critical audience user base. Now, how do we leverage that into something that actually starts generating revenue for the company or shareholders or whoever?
I think Twitter they slowly added so many different things. I mean, when they officially adopted hashtags, officially adopting retweets, then having the conversation view, all these embedded tweets, all the things that changed. Now this blue line thing, which I think throws away the idea of a timeline. It used to be that timeline was this as it happened. Now we're actually getting the conversation, the thing that started the conversation, bumped up to the top, which I don't know if it actually necessarily hurts the interaction with Twitter. Because for me, anytime I see, like, let's say, Roger, you replied somebody, and I want to know, wait, what is this in reference to? I'll immediately hit the view conversation button. It'll expand. So it's actually just doing that work for you. So you might want to be more interested in what's going on that way. But it just seems to mess with the whole timeline concept for me.
Are they in danger of messing with a very successful model to the point where that model no longer exists?
I think the big challenge is the question, how are we going to attract a bigger audience that maybe uses Twitter in a different way? Right now, there's a lot of people on Twitter that are actually active, that are engaged in these conversations, but what they really want to have is also people who just follow certain stars or TV shows or music or certain things without actually tweeting. And how do you get these people in? How do you make the product more useful for them? How do you make it possible to dive into Twitter every now and then and read up around something? And this conversation tool, the blue line, was an attempt to do that. But then the question is, how do you make this, bring all these new people in without alienating the people who have been building the service and made the service what it is today? That's always a challenge.
And the masses versus getting interaction. The weird thing is I've noticed how they've added so much feature creep. At some point, when you embed a tweet, you can have a video player, you can have a music player. It's effectively becoming like a whole blog post in one. So I'm just like, at some point, and they have Medium as well. There are other ways to do this. If you want to keep building out, they can kind of move those who've been alienated from Twitter and they want to have like just small conversations. Medium might be the way, or longer conversations. Medium might be their next thing, but it just seems like, or Branch, one of those two. I'm mixing them up right now.
Maybe we need the opposite version, only 70 seconds, 70 characters, like the minimum Twitter.
Mini Twitter. I like
Could very well be. Well, moving on from blue lines to pink mustaches, if you know what I'm talking about. Ride sharing, at least in California, by California regulators, was voted unanimously to be legal. That means services like Lyft,
Uber.
Sidecar, Uber, and you can run them. Before, a lot of the taxi cab associations, limousine companies were saying, well, you know, they can't do that because they're doing our job, but we have to pay all these taxes, we have to follow all these regulations, we've got to do yada, yada, yada. I think this is great because unless you're in San Francisco, you don't know how incredibly bad the taxi service is in the city. It's ridiculous. They won't drive it across town, or depending on where you're at, they may or may not take it, which is against the rules, by the way, but it's happened to me twice. I think this is great. I mean, this basically pairs up willing drivers with willing, paying customers. I think this is a win. I mean, do any of you disagree?
Well, I think the TLC, all those taxi and limousine commissions are probably just screaming about. I mean, they have been for the longest time trying to stop this stuff. I know in New York, like the whole medallion system is so old that it's like a prize to have one of these things. To run your own taxi company is a big deal. So if these new companies can come in and take away these profits after all the years of the amount of work they've had to lobby and do these kinds of things, I can see why they're irritated. But for consumers, for actual people who are not running these commissions, it's actually such a win. It just reminds me of like when I was in high school, the seniors never wanted us to have lunch tables because they didn't have lunch tables. It's like, just make it better for everyone. It would be great if we can all get cabs when we want to.
I think the flip side is that now that it is legal, it also has to be regulated, and that could actually be a good thing, I think. Everybody has always said, oh, they should be able to do what they want, and they just disrupt them and everything, but really you do need some regulation in the space to actually make sure that these companies play by some rules as well, right? And there's some conflicts around this ride sharing as well when it comes to like companies keeping the tips for the drivers, and some of these conflicts have bubbled up. I foresee that a lot of this stuff is going to get a lot more regulated and probably a lot more boring and less sexy, but then it might just work better.
All right. Speaking of things that drive thorns in people's sides, Brazil is looking to create a separate network away from the US-centric Internet. Now, this all stems from the fact that the NSA was caught spying on Petrobras. I think it's Brazil's petroleum company. Was outed by the Guardian's Greenwald, who actually lives in Rio, and Dilma Rousseff, the current president, has suggested that Brazil create a fiber optic link straight to Europe, bypassing any kind of NSA snooping because it wouldn't go through the US. Now, my question is, A, will this work? B, will this lead to other nations, say totalitarian nations like China, Russia, whatever? What would stop them from creating their own similar kind of private networks to keep their citizens from accessing information outside? Is it a good idea? And really, will this actually stop NSA spying? Because I don't think it will.
I doubt it's going to stop spying. I think there was a new report today that the UK spy agency was taking a look at something at Belgium because they had some other records. More leaks are coming out. So even if you went from Brazil to the UK is doing spying too. So it's not like every nation that doesn't have an intelligence agency. What's actually happening is that people are spilling the beans about such activities. I don't think any of us were surprised when we found out about the NSA stuff, really, because everyone's got the tinfoil hat concepts of we're being watched all the time. It just so happens that people were right. Whether it's going to lead to like a Balkanization of the internet, where you have like stuff that's only in Brazil or stuff that's only in the UK or stuff that's only in China. I mean, we've seen China's firewall, and we've seen Iran's got their own idea of what the internet's supposed to be. So we kind of already have that to some degrees. But I don't know if trying to wall yourself off is really going to stop you from being spied on. If anything, people are going to start wondering, hey, why are you walling yourself off? I'm going to double check what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it seems a little bit unrealistic and also populistic, this suggestion. I think part of the idea from Brazil was also not just the undersea cables, but if anybody from Brazil was going to use Facebook, then Facebook would have to host their data locally. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was what it came down to. And that doesn't really, I mean, in a way it actually makes sense to host data closer to where people live because it's more economic in a way. But with everything being as connected as it is, it doesn't really make sense for these services to just go into these countries and build their walled-off versions. It comes down to the same thing as China, I guess. Okay, do you want to be like Google in China? Do you want to have Yahoo in China? Should they build separate servers under separate rules? And there are some suspicious similarities between these.
Shouldn't there just be kind of a set of international protocols the same way we deal with the Antarctic? Like, no one effectively owns the Antarctic, because it's closed off to settlement except by scientific exploration. The same thing about space. Anyone can use space, no militarization of space. Some countries bend the rules a little bit, but effectively, you have an international treaty that everyone signs on to and says, okay, these are the rules, this is what you can and can't do. If you're caught, these are the repercussions. Do you think that's a better solution or even a realistic one?
I think trying to get everyone to agree on one thing, I think we've seen some of these conferences come together and they end up with resolutions of nothing because the somewhat unregulated internet's been really amazing. This idea that this network works at all is fantastic. And the thing is, when one country wants to have a lot of regulations, another one's going to fight back. It leads to no resolution. You try to have a treaty to say, well, everything should be accessible. Then China's like, no, that's not what we want. So then we have this disagreement. I don't know if it's even feasible to have international treaties on this you could try, but they would probably have like no teeth whatsoever unless the government's decided to have enacting legislation, and that's a whole other set of things. So how do you enforce this? Are you going to come over, say, hey, wait a second, you're blocking this, and it could just lead to much more conflicts. I don't know if there's a really good way, because there's nothing like this. I mean, international waters, at least you can figure that out, but internet, what are you going to do with that?
It's interesting because there's so many different, especially when it comes to cultural items. I mean, cultural items are the big taboo, right? Things that are legal in certain countries, like pornography or talk about open talk about sex and things like gay relationships might be forbidden in other areas of the world. I mean, how would you go about managing, or do you even manage? Is that left up to the member state to like say, okay, this content's allowed, this stuff isn't, we don't like this stuff?
I think that's what's starting to happen in a way, and it's kind of a somewhat dangerous trend that people like build their own firewalls around their countries. What it really comes down to with this Brazil story, I think, is corporate citizenship in a way, because what these people are not trusting, obviously they don't trust the NSA, and they shouldn't, but they also don't trust US companies, and they're now saying, oh, these US companies should host the data here, or we should have our own companies build our own cloud storage solutions. And so that's really a call to companies like Google and Amazon and so on to offer better solutions, more transparency around it, and maybe ramp up their encryption a little bit, build this into cloud storage and into email and stuff more. So make these things more technically less technically harder to compromise, as opposed to hoping like for the next big treaty to come.
I mean, could this effectively inhibit the whole kind of growth of transnational companies, where companies exist globally and they can do whatever they want because they can bounce around from jurisdiction to jurisdiction? But I mean, if you go into a country with a more protectionist mood, or perhaps different ways of doing things, and you start having to break things out into their subsidiaries, you effectively are just no longer that one large global company. You're a company made up of similar companies around the world that just happen to share the same name.
That's a big question. How do companies do that? And I think China was that big question for many companies, because Google kind of pulled out of China, maybe not completely, but sort of, and other companies have stayed in China and doing their own thing. And actually, I recently talked to a colleague who is from China, and she said the fact that Google pulled out of China actually made the situation much worse, because now there's local companies who deliver the same services but are much more under state control. So it's kind of a really thorny issue. How do companies deal with it? And I think it's going to come up more and more.
All right, going to our last story, which, by the way, is also involving Google. Google announced Calico, a new company that will focus on health and well-being, in particular, the challenge of aging and associated diseases. Now, along with the Google Loon, which is the whole project to deliver internet through giant floating gas bags high above Earth, is this just a little too much from Google when they should be concentrating on other things? I mean, is this kind of a Kurzweil-esque, we're gonna stamp out the mortality of humanity by slowly stripping away all those evil things like aging, disease, and stuff like that?
Well, Larry Page on his Google Plus post, he wrote something like, "This is a very small percentage of our money's going there." They have so far haven't disclosed how much money Google is backing Calico with. They're bringing in, I think it's Art Levinson from Genentech, who's also the chairman of Genentech, and Apple. Is going to be heading this thing. He's also an investor. So I don't know how much money Google's putting into this. So should they be doing other stuff? I don't know. What's wrong with a company that's making self-driving cars, that's giving you wearable computing, that's come out with a competitive operating system for, actually I guess Windows with Chrome OS and Android versus iOS. If they're going to go out there and you're going to have all this money, sometimes you just wonder, what are you doing with this cash hoard? What are you going to do with this? You're just going to acquire companies? If they can, the challenges of aging, that's the weird phrase they have there. I don't know the end goal for immortality, somebody's going to have to do it. I guess Google might be crazy enough to do it.
But my concern is this, it's not to say that it isn't a worthwhile endeavor, but typically, and I use BlackBerry as an example, there was a situation where if you're not familiar, BlackBerry had two CEOs. They had kind of this dual CEO, founder, CEO, but they kind of let their eyes wander off into other things that had nothing to do with their core business. They one went around trying to acquire an NHL team for Waterloo, or at least Ontario. The other guy spent how do I better humanity by setting up a think tank? Now, unfortunately, during that time, BlackBerry was basically spinning and plummeting toward the earth. Is this a case where, it's nice, it's cool, but, really, in the end, is this better left to when Larry Page decides to retire or something else? I mean, even Bill Gates, he set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That was after he left Microsoft. Is it something you do while you're actively running a company?
It is kind of interesting. It seems like these CEOs have a little too much time on their hand.
Exactly.
Elon Musk is the same example for this, where he just kind of sits around and is like, it would be great going to Los Angeles in half an hour. Let's do like this super fast mode of transportation, and then he sketches stuff up. Bought Elon Musk, by the way, if you guys don't know it yet, it's the best Twitter fake account yet to follow because it spits out like seamlessly crazy seeming ideas constantly. But yeah, and this seems just like it a little bit. On the other hand, I do see a point in there that somebody has to kind of tackle these big problems, and we used to have good funding for research, and we used to have like Palo Alto Research Center, right, where they really laid the groundwork for the future of computing just through public funds, and these public funds have dried off. So maybe companies like Google should sit in. But then the question is, are these companies really in the point where they can judge well on what to spend that money on?
I can see Loon making sense because that's internet delivery, that's data delivery. Going into genetics seems a bit of a reach, at least in terms of.
Well, if people live forever, they're going to look at more Google ads for
There's
a
that.
much longer
Potentially.
time.
And can they just embed those ads in you? I mean, if they're going to have you live longer, they're going to have this. Like, how can they somehow either change your genetic code so you're more predisposed to look at ads in the right side or the right-hand rail? Because right now, when it comes to web pages, I have right-hand rail blindness. I can't see ads because I just don't look at them anymore. So maybe that's the gimmick. You're right, more ads because you'll live longer.
Google will have taken over the earth when part of your ID will have your Gmail address or some other Google identifier in it. All right, last story, very, very last story. I thought it was funny because it is funny. The German Pirate Party used a drone to crash Angela Merkel's event over in Dresden. Now, for those who you might not know, Chancellor Angela Merkel is the sitting chancellor in Germany. Just went through an election campaign.
Actually, coming up. She's going through the campaign there, but the election's coming up.
The Pirate Party is one of the it is the minorest party in German politics. But they flew a little quad helicopter drone, and they landed it right on stage. First of all, it seems kind of a security breach.
Yeah.
Two, is this just grandstanding on the part of the Pirate Party to kind of get attention since, frankly, they're not doing so hot, at least amongst the voters? Yeah,
I think actually the drone also crashed, which apparently this whole idea of pulling off this stunt kind of crashed in a way, right? It's a metaphor for it in a way, if you will. But at the same time, yeah, it was a security issue. I think in the future, everybody's going to be searched for remote controls and for little helicopters. It's not just weapons anymore. It's going to be like your helicopter stuff. But it's interesting that how much drones are now pretty much everywhere, and they're used for all kinds of different things. I think the Pirate Party meant to protest military drones for this. It wasn't even clear from most of the articles what was going on there, why they really flew this helicopter over the
Which means it's
chancellor.
a very bad stunt if you can't get the political message across.
But it is interesting how much they're mattering now everywhere. When it comes to media production, when it comes to agriculture, military obviously, and spying, and apparently political protest.
And this is the first time I've actually heard this story. So this is like, wait, I didn't know this even happened. And then, like to your point, the idea that you look for remotes. I think drones can be controlled by your phones at that point. So they're going to ruin all the fun for all of us. If you have your phone, you got to put it aside because you might be a drone pilot because you can just be doing that.
You could be a drone pilot too.
So Google drones and we'll be ride sharing. So that's the future, everyone. Look for it. All right, that's all the time we have for this episode. I'd like to thank Iyaz Akhtar and Janko Roettgers for joining me today. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please post them below on the YouTube comments section. And until next time, you've been watching Downloaded.